I think the interesting thing about the Beetle and the Beetle advertising is the two things were so good a match with one another. If you look for what the key to that match was, it was integrity, I think. The car had an integrity, the way it was built, the way the changes were only made to make the car work better.
I remember with enormous fondness the Volkswagen Beetle. Why was it so successful? Well, I mean, to start with, it was an extraordinarily simple product.
It struck me as this incredibly honest car and a very honest approach in the advertising. Over the years I got closer and closer to the advertising, more involved in it, working with David Abbott, who was the creative director of Doyle Dane Bernbach, who of course created the campaign, both in the States, in the UK and worldwide. The campaign had already been established in the States and the tone of voice was set, and it was very revolutionary in its modesty and its charm and its wit and everything else.
And now the star of the 1949 auto show, the car of the future, the car the public wants, the all-new DeSoto.
The long skirts will be the next look on the fashion scene. The Studebaker will be the next look on the automotive scene.
So there's no doubt about it, next year every car in America will have holes in its side.
So demand to see if you're buying your next car for keeps is your nearby Packard dealer.
Longer, wider, the 49 Hudson is the car for you.
So Volkswagen will constantly be changing, improving, and refining this car. Not necessarily to keep in style with the times, but to make a better car, which means to all of you, better miles.
Of all the promises made at the 1949 auto show, we at Volkswagen kept ours.
The Volkswagen is one of the tallest cars in the world, so there's more than enough headroom, even for the little woman.
As you remember last week, Gino Milano, our little shoemaker here, successfully answered all the questions in his chosen category, cars. This week, he's back to tell us whether or not he'll step up to the big plateau. Gino, what is your decision?
I go.
Okay, we go! Gino Milano, car expert. Here is a brand new 1968 Volkswagen. How many changes can you find? You have 10 seconds. Look it over. How many changes are there?
None. Volkswagens never change.
Poor Gino. He was done in by the 1968 Volkswagen and the 36 nice little changes that made this short program possible.
When the agency first got the account in London, there were some who felt that it needed a different approach, that this kind of New York humour wasn't going to be appropriate. So there was a false start, and the ads were slightly more aggressive and tougher and had less charm and whimsy. But very soon we realised that, in fact, the Volkswagen tone of voice would work equally well here, and we switched. It wasn't difficult, no. I mean, a wonderful model had been set, and we followed that pattern.
It's one of them new ones, isn't it?
But it ain't.
How much? I can tell by them. Almost as big as the headlights.
Still.
Anyway, the windscreen's different.
Yeah, look at that. It's all curved.
Of course it is.
And look at the flashy speedo and the dash. It's padded.
Those seats go into 77 different positions.
How'd you know?
Because, my man's getting a new one, isn't he?
About time. This has been around as long as Bobby Charlton.
Still goes, doesn't it?
Blimey, it must be bigger inside and all.
The new Volkswagen 1303. We've made so many improvements, they're beginning to show.
The ads themselves, each individual concept, was always quite difficult to do, simply because it demanded a particular tone of voice and a particular style, and you had to learn that. And there were some writers and art directors who never learned it, just couldn't get the tone of voice.
The remarkable thing about Volkswagen advertising is that it is one of the campaigns for a brand that remained constant over a very long time. With most brands, you can see changes of strategies and changes of attitudes, and the company displaying all the time different facets of the organization. With Beetle advertising, it was always extraordinarily consistent.
What makes a Volkswagen the most seaworthy car on the road? A sheet of steel seals the bottom, fore and aft, and the top part is practically airtight. So a Volkswagen can definitely float, but not indefinitely.
Try looking at a Volkswagen this way. It's the only small car with a sealed steel bottom that leaves nothing exposed beneath it. It's the only small car with this four-wheel independent suspension system, and it's built to take a little punishment. As small as the VW is, it's covered with 13 pounds of paint, outside and in, even in places you can't see, but which corrosion can find. In fact, the VW is so well put together, it's practically airtight. Now, what other car gives you this kind of quality at this kind of price?
Some of the most unusual things about a Volkswagen are things you don't usually see, like paint in the most out-of-the-way places, like one wheel being able to take a bump without the other wheel feeling a thing, and like this steel bottom that protects our inside elements from the outside elements. You couldn't find a better buy if you stood on your head.
If you go back to the very beginning of television advertising and indeed to press advertising, you will find that by the late 50s, early 60s, advertising became progressively kind of jazzier and terribly lively and especially in the United States, dancing goes and God knows what else, and product features by the million. Volkswagen advertising just simply said, this is a good quality product, you can rely on it, and it'll take you there.
This is a dramatization of a true story. On November 28, 1970, a terrible storm developed in the Sierra Nevada mountains. 6 months later, when emergency crews cleared the road, something strange happened. A car was found, a Volkswagen, buried beneath tons of snow and ice. But even stranger than that, when the crew supervisor turned the ignition key,
my mother, she was a cleaner at, I suppose what we call a posh lady's house in St. George's Hill, which is sort of a rather exclusive part of Surrey. And she used to take me up there as a kid, and I never stopped. She was up there, worked there for about 20 years. And during the school holidays, one day I went up there to be with her, I was never into mischief, but I went up there anyway with her, and I was thumbing through the magazines on their coffee table, because we didn't have coffee tables in our house. The only tables you had the things you ate off. And they had these sort of fancy American magazines, and things like Vogue, and I think it was a copy of New Yorker, and I can never understand anybody wanted to read a magazine, didn't have any pictures in it, but it had funny cartoons. And I was flicking through the page, and I saw this advertisement, and it was for a Volkswagen. Now, up until then, I used to think that Volkswagens were like how we treat Skodas now. You know, whenever you see anybody driving one, you feel sorry for them. And, you know, you always imagine that they were very poor people, and how could they possibly want to own a car like that, because it was so ugly. I suppose at the time there was sort of like Ford Capris around and Mustangs, so as a 13-year-old I was most likely more inspired to drive one of those. But this advertisement had a back picture of a Volkswagen, a Beetle, and chalked around the back window, like the shape of a bigger window. And it just said, we asked, the headline said, I think, we asked a famous Italian designer what changes would he make to the Beetle, and this is all he suggested, a bigger window.
Some time ago, the Volkswagen people went to see one of Italy's most famous automobile designers.
Buongiorno, signorina.
Buongiorno. Volete seguirmi, per favore?
Grazie. Buongiorno. Molto piacere.
Ben arrivati, prego, prego.
Buongiorno.
L'ho fatto buon viaggio?
Ottimo.
Molto traffico in questi giorni, eh?
Cose formidabili. Bene, bene.
They gave him this assignment.
Quali miglioramenti?
What changes would you recommend in the design of the Volkswagen? He studied it and studied it. Then he said,
Ingrandire il finestrino di dietro.
make the rear window larger.
Solamente questo?
That's all?
Solo questo.
That's all. We did, starting with the 58. A Volkswagen is never changed to make it look different, only to make it work better.
And I remember reading the copy, and I was very impressed by this, because I just assumed if an Italian car designer suggested that, he must really, really know what he's talking about, and it can't be such a bad car after all. But what was, intrigued me was the fact that there was an advertisement that spoke very clearly and didn't have, I suppose, we were always brought up to believe that ads were untruthful, and there was an ad that actually supposedly told the truth.
It was a terrific car. I mean, I think, though the ads deserve a lot of credit, advertising isn't a kind of witch doctor. It can't create something that isn't there. It's like a barrister, it's an advocate. You can stand up and you can put the best case for something, but you can't invent a case for something. This was a car that was right for its time, that had charm and practicality, and I think it became a classless car in a strange sort of way. It was a car that if you didn't have a lot of money, you bought because you wanted it, not simply because it was dictated by your bank balance. And we made it a car, I think, for people who think. I mean, it was a car that you bought because of your intellect, not because of your bank balance.
If you owned an 8-year-old Volkswagen and had it washed every now and then, who would know it's an 8-year-old Volkswagen? Except you.
Ever wish you didn't have radiator problems? Ever wish you didn't have a radiator? Ever wish you could sail through mud or snow? Ever wish your car didn't guzzle so much gas? The Volkswagen has no radiator problems. In fact, no radiator. The Volkswagen engine is cooled by air. Can't freeze in winter or boil over in summer. The Volkswagen engine's in the rear. You go in mud or snow. The Volkswagen cuts most gas bills in half. Ever wish you owned a Volkswagen?
Volkswagen has a lot of things you can't get in other cars, like an aluminum magnesium air-cooled engine and back, the most advanced service system in the world, great resale value, and it costs less than $2,000. Maybe if it cost more, people wouldn't leave it out in the rain. Sedan 111 suggested retail price, POE, local taxes and other dealer charges, if any, additional.
In the 50s, when this agency called Doyle Dane Bernbach was set up, at the head of it was a man called Bill Bernbach. He was a very intelligent and he was a very gifted copywriter. And he decided that they might try something different in advertising, and it was called truth. Now, if you bother to go through Doyle Dane Bernbach's advertising of the time, and you'll find that most of the ads were actually very truthfully written. There was no glamour attached to them, and they were always very elegantly laid out. You could read them, and they weren't fussy or flashy, which up until then, I would say, would be the natural way that everybody perceived advertising. And especially with the Volkswagen campaign, and if you could be bothered to compare the Volkswagen ads of the early 60s when they were done and other car advertising, they are incredibly different.
One of the common themes in Volkswagen advertising was the admission that it wasn't a pretty car. And we were sitting down trying to do one of these ads, and I remember talking to my art director at the time, Brian Byford, and said, why don't we do something around Marty Feldman, who at the time was not pretty but very popular, and we felt there was a kind of metaphor there, analogy. And so we quickly came up with this ad, which was just a huge picture of Marty Feldman and the line that said, if he can make it, so can we. And that was the easy part. The difficult part was then going to Marty Feldman and saying, would you agree to do this ad? And I remember going to him and showing him the concept, and he read the copy and he said, but you're suggesting that I'm ugly, which when Marty Feldman looks at you, or we think you think he's looking at you, was actually quite a difficult thing to answer. So I said, yes, well, but when talking about talent, anyhow, he saw the fun in it, and he did the ad, and I think he got a Beetle for it. So I think that was one of the ads that in England got the most attention. It was a nice ad. I'm very pleased with it still.
There are, of course, many outstanding VW press ads and commercials. I mean, the very famous print ads are things like Lemon and Think Small, which really established the campaign in a very simple layout. On television, I think one of the ads I love most is Mr. Jones and Mr. Krempler, where the ad hits head-on the differential in price between the Beetle and the conventional large American saloon, and demonstrates the difference in price very graphically.
Mr. Jones and Mr. Krempler were neighbors. They each had $3,000. With his money, Mr. Jones bought himself a $3,000 car. With his money, Mr. Krempler bought himself a new refrigerator, a new range, a new washer, a new dryer, a record player, 2 new television sets, and a brand new Volkswagen. Now Mr. Jones is faced with that age-old problem, keeping up with the Kremplers.
I think for me the press advertisement, I remember with fondness, it's an American advertisement created by Doyle Dane Bernbach. It's about 2 old people sitting outside their hut in the mountains. In front of them there is the Beetle, and the headline says, this was the only thing to do after the mule died. I mean, it's extraordinarily simple. It doesn't say really much, but it says everything at the same time.
I can't remember any particular ads that, I think it was controversial ads were done usually by David Abbott.
I suppose one of my all-time favourites on the Beetle would have been the funeral procession. This is the cortege leaving the burial ground, and we see inside all these limos the departing mourners, and while we're seeing them, we hear the voiceover is the will being read.
I, Maxwell Snavely, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the following. To my wife Rose, who spent money like there was no tomorrow, I leave $100 and a calendar. To my sons, Rodney and Victor, who spent every dime I ever gave them on fancy cars and fast women, I leave $50 in dimes. To my business partner, Jules, whose only motto was spend, 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 I leave nothing, nothing, nothing. And to my other friends and relatives who also never learned the value of a dollar, I leave $1. Finally, to my nephew Harold, who oft-times said, a penny saved is a penny earned, and who also oft-times said, gee, Uncle Max, it sure pays to own a Volkswagen. I leave my entire fortune of $100 billion.
I mean, there's one ad in the book. It's a picture of a Beetle, and it's got a fridge on the top, and it just says all for the price of an Austin 1100. And at the time, the Austin 1100 was a similar sort of capacity car, but the Volkswagen was actually artificially about £200 cheaper. At that time, that caused a great controversy. Upset Austin was being British Motor Corp, BMC, was it? Yeah, BMC. And they were very outraged, and also I think they redrew the rules of comparative advertising. You couldn't be comparative. And of course, the great thing is about Volkswagen advertising that you always had a decent product, so you could say what you like.
But of all the different Volkswagen commercials, there is one that stands out. That if you talk to any advertising person, I think, in almost any country of the world, and you mention Volkswagen advertising, they will mention this one commercial. And it is probably the simplest commercial, and it's called Snowplow. And it shows a car cutting through the crisp snow, arriving at a sort of barn in the middle of nowhere.
Have you ever wondered how the man who drives a snowplow drives to the snowplow? This one drives a Volkswagen. So you can stop wondering.
But there's another one that takes place in the snow, and it's directed by a man called Howard Zeef, and it's still beautifully simple. And it's the classic. It's a winter's night in a station car park, one imagines, somewhere up in upstate New York. And you know the guys just got off the train because they've got the sound effects. And these two guys are walking to their cars, and one drives a flash American car, limo, and the other guy drives a Volkswagen. And of course, you know, they exchange, say, see you in the morning, and they get in the car, and of course the Volkswagen starts up first time.
Hi, need a lift?
Oh, thanks. I don't know what's wrong. Well, that's a wonderful car I have back there. Did you notice?
Yeah.
Oh, it's loaded. Everything they sell. Power brakes, power steering, power windows, power seats, power radio antenna. And it rides like a dream. Oh, it'll do 120 easy. 400 horses, you know. You have no idea what a sense of power that gives you. And it all works on push buttons. Say, you're a nice guy.
Well,
Too bad you have to drive this little thing. I'm going to let you take mine for a spin. As soon as winter's over.
It's a great ad because not once did they talk about the Volkswagen.
There was a great print ad actually that ran the States, which was, does the gear stick scare your wife? And it just had a gear stick sticking up, you know. There is also a very interesting ad, which is a sort of skit on Mice and Men, which they used to introduce the stick shift to America. As you know, America was a country where automatic gearboxes were you know, de rigueur. Every car had to have an automatic gearbox, and one of the things that held the Beetle back for a long time was people just, you know, hadn't learned to drive with a gear shift. So they brought out this hybrid design called the automatic stick shift, where it had an electronic clutch, so when you touched the gear shift, the clutch went in. And they introduced this with a wonderful little pastiche on Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men.
You gonna tell me about the rabbits again, George?
No, Barney. You know what we have to do today.
Yeah, I remember, George, but I can't drive no Volkswagen. I can't work no gear shift. I can't use no clutch pedal.
Barney, if I've told you once now, I've told you 100 times. This is the new thing Volkswagen has. It's called the automatic stick shift. There ain't no clutch pedal, and there ain't no problems.
I don't know, George. I just don't know.
Barney, you get in the car.
I get in the car.
You turn on the key.
I turn on the key.
You put it in drive.
I put it in drive.
You drive away.
And I drive away.
That's it, Barney. It's as simple as ABC.
That's right, George. It's as simple as
There's a different one with car transport and going through the night. New car time, 69. And the boys have really come up with something special this year.
It's here. New car time, 1969. And this year, the new car boys have put together something really special. 3,600 pounds of precision-built machinery, longer than a limousine, seats 8, 4 big doors, 12 big windows. Not one heater, 2. Not one rear window defroster, 2. Not one radiator, none. But what makes this package really special? It costs no more than the average automobile and goes in 2 different directions at once.
Once Volkswagen in the United States took aboard Bill Bernbach and his company DDB, then all the advertising, in a way, the advertising direction tended to come from, in a way, from that one man. I think in terms of what Volkswagen stands for today, he has contributed an enormous amount. The remarkable thing about the man was that he basically believed that you ought not exaggerate in advertising. I mean, one of the funny things he did say was that you should never turn a man on his head in advertising unless you want to demonstrate that something will not fall out of his pocket.
There was such a wonderful high standard set that every time you had a Volkswagen ad, it had to be as good as the last one. And that was an enormous challenge.
This is the only way a Volkswagen will take you to the cleaners.
Welcome to the Volkswagen factory, where every day a bloodthirsty mob of 8,397 inspectors decrees whether or not a Volkswagen will live or die. Should it lose favor with any one of them, even for the slightest whim, it will die. Should any one of its 5,000 parts be deemed defective, even for reasons unseen by the untrained eye, it will die. For only after every single part has passed at least 3 inspections, and only after 16,000 triumphant inspections in all, may a contestant then leave this arena with a worthy title, Volkswagen. Now, let the games begin.
country in the Middle East with just about the most oil of any place in the world, and therefore just about the most money per person and the most cars per person of any place in the world. But regrettably, very few Volkswagens. With all that oil, who needs a Volkswagen because it doesn't take much oil or gas? With all that money, who needs a Volkswagen because it doesn't cost much? And with all that parking space, who needs a Volkswagen because it's so easy to park? So a country like this doesn't need Volkswagens. But what about an underdeveloped country, like America?
Presenting the Great Zandu. The Great Zandu will now amaze you with his incredible mental powers.
When a car is essential to your job, you want it fixed in a hurry. A Volkswagen dealer can replace an engine in little over an hour, or a fender with just 10 bolts. And with genuine Volkswagen parts always available, you'll be back to work in no time.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Great Zandu. The Great Zandu will now...
They became part of everyday culture, particularly in America. You know, have you seen the latest Volkswagen ad, either in the New Yorker or on television? So, I mean, it was exciting but demanding.
In design, really good design can be and should be timeless. It should be able to kind of live through fashion fads that tend to come and go in any society, but good things and kind of pure shapes. Not only in car design, but in anything, in building design, in fashion, clothing, and so on. Really good design things can survive and capable of being used as a style for a long period of time.
I was taken in by the car, I was taken in by the advertising. I still love to look at the commercials, not because of their selling messages, because they're so charming and honest. They're great pieces of entertainment.
This is a very fancy convertible, the most expensive convertible you can buy. This is a Volkswagen convertible, the least expensive four-passenger convertible you can buy. Now, which man would you vote for?
In Pacific, Missouri, Richard Winkler rides herd on his cattle without riding a horse. He rides a bug. The bug, one of the fastest, strongest, most dependable animals alive.
You think that's a Volkswagen you're looking at? Well, it is, and it isn't. It's a Volkswagen we put together ourselves, from parts.
So in case you've been wondering about how many parts we carry, you can stop wondering. We carry all you need.
They finally made a car big enough for Durante. You know, folks, when you're built like me, you can't get just any old new car. You gotta get one with all kinds of extra room, especially extra breathing room for the old schnozzola, plenty of headroom and lots of leg room. This car also has big bucket seats. And folks, when I say that this car is big enough for Durante, that also means it's big enough for a little companionship. Good night, folks. Ink.
Introducing the 1973 Super Beetle. It's so big and comfortable inside, you won't know it's a Volkswagen until you're outside.
The Beetle advertising is considered one of the most influential advertising campaigns in the history of the industry.
Yeah, I think the influence of Volkswagen and of Doyle Dane and that style of advertising will be with us forever. I mean, it changed really the way that advertising talked to its audience. I think in certain times of recession and certain hard times, the whimsy and the humor and the ease and relaxation of that kind of advertising maybe is pushed into the background, but it will never disappear. It is the best way to sell a product.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm from Volkswagen, and I've got a music problem.
I'm Ronnie. I'm Johnny. You got a problem. We got a song.
Well, we're very excited about the 29 improvements in our 1972 Super Beetle. I thought perhaps a theme song.
We did car gigs, yeah.
Improvement number 1. The compression ratio has been optimized through dish pistons.
Dish pistons optimized compression ratio.
Oh, yes, I know. Oh.
You got anything else?
Improvement number 2, increased air inlet groupings. Number 18, an advanced manifold preheating system. Finally, improvement number 29, floating bearings for most mounting points. The most improved Volkswagen ever.
Kid, 5,000 canaries whistling the bluebird of happiness couldn't help you.
Er soll heißen Karte extra. Er soll heißen